American Racing Snobs on the air once again. Tony Rizzuti alongside Eric Morse getting ready for the Singapore Grand Prix at the Marina Bay Circuit. Eric, fired up for some more Formula One action this weekend.
Night racing. It's our only proper night race. I think, Abu Dhabi goes day in tonight at the season finale. But this one, it was the original F1 night race. It's a street course. It's its own unique race. You kind of put it up there on a pedestal alongside Monaco and some of the other classic races because this is one of those tracks that everybody wants to win on. Also, coming off of the summer break, Ferrari's been undefeated. It feels good to say that, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
So I don't think that's going to continue here. I don't think anybody's really looking for a Ferrari. I think they'll be scrapping for the podium if they're lucky, but this should be a great race, and it sets up the sprint to the championship, basically, the end of the season.
I thought this was interesting. They've decided to add a third DRS zone. It's going to be at the back of the track between turns 13 and 14, and there is a decent little straightaway there. I thought that was kind of interesting to add another DRS zone. You know me. I think DRS as a gimmick is about as good as you can get to make it a chance to overtake kind of, I don't know how to say it because it's a gimmick, but I like the gimmick. I think the gimmick works without being overly gimmicky. I know that makes no sense, but it does. So I don't mind adding some things to at least keep the cars a little bit closer. What are your thoughts on a third DRS?
I think it's a good idea, but I don't think it's going to help overtaking that much. I think it'll help someone
keep them close,
run.
Maybe?
Yeah, it'll keep it interesting, and if someone makes a mistake, then they'll be there to pounce. But remember that first race we had here in 2008? Where Fernando Alonso ended up with the lead through some trickery and chicanery and outright throwing of the race by his teammate. But that car had no business being in the lead of a Formula One Grand Prix in 2008, and it ended up winning the race because it's so difficult to pass here. Now, that's pre-DRS back in the day there. I think DRS came in, 2011?
Yeah, I believe so.
Was when they first started introducing that. So I still don't think that you're going to see a lot of passing regardless of what you do there. The track is just so narrow, and it's the nature of a street circuit. You just, even if it is high speed, unless you get a real wide, long straightaway like you have at Baku, it's just difficult to engineer an overtake there.
It's a track that four-time winner Lewis Hamilton described as hotter than hell. The temperatures this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 90, 90, and 90. That's hot there. The humidity's like 1,000,000,000% there as well. So it's going to be slippery. It's going to be warm. It's going to be a traditional race like we see at Singapore.
Now the question is, can Mercedes cope with that heating issue? We saw that was their weakness at Austria and to a lesser extent at Germany in qualifying. A little bit in Spa when they had hot weather on Friday and Saturday there. The question is, one, did they engineer a solution that will allow them to compete? And two, will it cool off enough? Because this is running the night at Singapore, will that cool off enough to still lend them the advantage and not have to trim the car out to the point where it's affecting their performance like we saw in Austria where they could only limp home in, I think 5th and 6th spot for the Mercedes?
It's interesting because just when you start to get back now, we went through Spa and Monza, and those were the tracks where we said, okay, Ferrari's back in it at those tracks. But once we get past there, we're going to get back to what was status quo, which is Mercedes dominating the field, and then Ferrari and Red Bull battling for that spot on the podium. But it's interesting how Formula One, when you get into what should be chalk, if you will, now we throw some extra things in. It's going to be hot. That's a problem for Mercedes. We throw in another DRS zone. That's a chance for Ferrari if they can stay close to power in and maybe force a mistake. It's interesting how Formula One can create storylines when we should be going to, here we go, Lewis going to run away with it.
Well,
it's wild how that happens.
There are two things I think are going to define this race. The upgrade package for the Honda Spec 4 and whatever Mercedes is bringing to the table, because they have an engine upgrade as well. I think this is a track that Red Bull has historically been a little quicker than their average pace over the course of the season. Now, does Mercedes have an answer for it? Because this is a car that's not like your traditional Mercedes from the past cars in the turbo hybrid era that were just monsters down the straightaway. This is a car that's really good in low-speed corners. I think Mercedes could have an answer for them. The question is, who's got the best upgrade, and will the hot temperatures affect the Mercedes? I think we're going to see an epic battle, especially in qualifying, between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. I think it's going to come down to those two drivers. I think those cars are both suited to this track, and those are two guys who are just on their form right now.
What's your over and under on Max saying he's losing power?
I'm certain he'll say it at least once. It sounds like they keep hitting a fail-safe mode, whether it's some procedure that Max does, maybe going up through the gears or down through the gears or something like that, and he's got to hit a sequence of buttons to reset it. But it sounds like that's something that happens kind of frequently with the software that they have on the Red Bull this year, that with the Honda engine, remember this is their first year with Honda, there's some growing pains, and it seems like Max has a knack for knocking the car into some sort of, not low power mode, but some reduced power mode when he's expecting the engine to be punchier at certain stages during the race or even over the course of the entire weekend.
We have some news to talk about. I know you have a kind of an extended Morse code report because we had a lot of racing series in action, so let's just jump right into our picks here. Those of you that follow along know how we do this. We kind of pick our favorite, who we think is going to win the race. Then we kind of have a bogey pick, and that one's just kind of like, hey, if it doesn't go the way we think it is, this is another guy that we think could sneak in there. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. And then we do a midfield MVP, that guy that's on the outside looking in with some teams that we think we can score good. Sometimes they're the number 2 driver with a good team, but that's how we do this. And I think it's going to be no surprise to you that I'm going to go with Lewis Hamilton to win the Singapore Grand Prix.
I'd like to agree with you. I think it's a 2-horse battle. I think it comes down to Max and Lewis.
I do too.
Just to be contrarian, and just because the last time we had a regular traditional Grand Prix where you don't have those straightaways that benefit the Ferrari, remember it was Max Verstappen beating Lewis Hamilton to pole position in Hungary. Lewis got the last laugh in the race, but I don't think there's a strategy that you can count on to leapfrog somebody, even if you do have a better race pace because of the nature of this track. If Max Verstappen beats Lewis Hamilton on Saturday, then he will beat him on Sunday, so I'm going to go with Max. I think it's 50-50 on the pole position. Whoever starts higher between those two drivers will win this race.
I agree with you. And if you'll remember from last year's race, at one point in time, Max had closed up right on the back of Lewis Hamilton. They were trying to work through lap traffic. The lap traffic are fighting each other for position. I think Grosjean got in the way of Max, and from that point, Lewis was able to pull away, and I think he won by 8 or 9 seconds. I agree with you. I'm going to throw... I have Max for my bogey pick, right? He's the other guy that I think
that's not allowed to be a bogey pick.
Well,
I think for the rest of the year, we can consider both Ferraris, both Mercedes, and Max Verstappen. That's your...
Well, I was going to say keep an eye on Leclerc.
Yeah.
Leclerc was 9th here last year in an underpowered Alpha. Seems to get around that track really well, so I'm going to say keep an eye on Leclerc. He's going to kind of be my bogey because I think we both agree those two cars, the 33 and the 44, are the cars to watch.
Absolutely.
I think if a Ferrari won the pole, we'd both be like, what?
Yeah,
right?
That would be the upset of the season so far, is if anyone other than Bottas, Hamilton, or Verstappen gets pole position at Singapore, that would be jaw-dropping to me.
Fair enough. I'll go with Leclerc, and I know he's part of the red team, but he's going to be my bogey.
Alex Albon.
I love it.
I think that he is showing incredible bravery with that car, and this is a track that rewards the brave because there are some scary corners, some scary braking zones. If he can qualify well and put together a clean weekend, I'm looking for good things out of Alex Albon. He's racing for his career right now.
I'll tell you, the guy to watch out there is going to be Sergio Perez. Remember, last year he ran Ocon into the wall, then he took out Sorokin, just drove right into the side of him. He doesn't quite like this track, so I do not have Sergio Perez as my midfield MVP. I just gave it away. I like Carlos Sainz. I like the Renault as my midfield MVP.
See, I was going to pick Carlos Sainz in the McLaren as my midfield MVP.
What'd I say?
You said Renault. But he was driving the Renault last year. He had a great race. I think he finished 8th. He was in the points. And so was Fernando Alonso in the McLaren.
We need a delete button on this podcast. Like, once it comes out of your mouth, there's nothing you can do. I told a reporter that once.
Don't worry. I'm here to keep you honest, Tony. I think you stole my pick. I do like McLaren at this track. Traditionally, they tend to be quicker than they are.
Norris is strong.
Lando is good.
Strong everywhere he's been.
But Carlos has experience here, and he has performed well.
He was really good last year here.
Yeah, he was the midfield MVP in the debate, at least, last year with him and Alonso, the two Spaniards fighting tooth and nail to the finish at Singapore in 2018. I think that Carlos Sainz could have a very good weekend.
What about Danny Rick?
Coming off his best week of the season. I mean, was he fourth in Monza? The question is, was Monza a blip on the radar, kind of like it was for Ferrari, as this is a track that's different and it kind of suits where we're at with our package right now? Or has Renault hit something? I think that's going to be one of the most exciting storylines from here to the finish of the season is McLaren versus Renault. They're the only two Renault-powered teams out there, and one of them's a supplier, one of them's a customer. This could get real awkward real fast.
Yep. So who'd you go with, Sainz?
Yeah, well, but I guess I got to go.
You don't have to.
No, here I'll be contrary. I like the idea of let's just go completely off the radar. Let's pick Toro Rosso, Danny Kvyat.
Had a good year.
Yeah, he's been quietly consistent. Oh, and by the way, he has a podium. I think that's the only podium finish outside of the big three teams this year was Danny Kvyat in Hockenheim. If anything strange happens, he could be there to pounce, but I do think that on pure pace, Sainz is probably the favorite to be midfield MVP, but I'm going to keep an eye on those Renaults as well, just to see that fight, as we mentioned. There's some awkwardness right now between McLaren and Renault.
Oh, we're about to talk about that.
Oh, well, take us there, Tony.
Well,
What's up?
let's just review our picks. I have Lewis, Leclerc, and Sainz. You went all bulls of the red variety with Max, Albon, and Kvyat. Did you realize you had done that?
No, because I had
all
planned to
hyped
go
up
Sainz.
on energy drink.
Yeah, something I don't even drink.
I don't either.
I had actually planned to go Sainz, but that's fine. I like the continuity there. It looks like a team.
Speaking of energy drink, Rich Energy officially off the car this weekend. Same color scheme, just with the Haas markings on it, and peak antifreeze, I believe, is going to be on the winglets of the car. You mentioned Renault and McLaren. Obviously, Sarah Abitable has said it's really difficult right now. It's very awkward because we're racing with the team we're supplying engines to and have this great relationship with. Really awkward situation.
And there's a buttload of money on the line. This is battling for the constructors' fourth and fifth position, and there are millions and millions of dollars on the line. Right now, McLaren has the advantage. But if Renault can do what they did last week, they finished, fourth and fifth with Ricciardo and Hülkenberg? If that's part of a bigger trend, they could seriously put the pressure on McLaren for the end of the year because from, Catalunya forward, McLaren was clearly the class of the midfield. I'm not sure if that picture is going to be so clear if Renault can keep pace with them the next couple weeks. We could have a real good fight with a lot on the line. And as you mentioned, the only two Renault-powered cars in the field, the only two Renault-powered teams at least, in the field, that could get very uncomfortable.
And as you could expect, Renault's saying the improvement in McLaren is clearly their power plant and what they've been able to do, though he did admit that they've had a really good chassis that's been a little bit better than where Renault is. But you remember it was only a couple races ago that McLaren, after blowing up engines, was like, hey, Renault, we need a lot more clarity here.
Transparency
was the word.
Yeah.
So it has been awkward with them, but then McLaren came back out and said, look, we are not going to compromise our 2020 to save fourth place in this championship. They are looking long-term. They're already looking out at the next car, and they're not going to sacrifice any of the development of a new car and the R&D of a new car to make the factory have to just scramble to save fourth place. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, keep in mind that all of these comments were made public on purpose. This is posturing in the media.
There's nothing said in Formula One that's not on purpose.
Yeah, it's all politics. This isn't like someone overheard something and then leaked and said, hey, I heard this. No, these people are saying these things because they're putting the pressure to each other. It's just like Abiteboul and Christian Horner last year in the media going back and forth about their engines and their drivers and, would they or would they not stay with Renault over at Red Bull, and then Renault swooped in and took Danny Ricciardo out from underneath Red Bull. All of this is done in the public eye for a reason. I'm sure there's plenty of back-channel communications that we're not hearing about, but for McLaren to come out and say we need transparency means that they're concerned about what they've heard in the back channels, and they're just putting that out there so that if this does become a war, they've already kind of put their spin on it. That's part of F1 it's so exciting on the racetrack, and then it's so conniving and manipulative behind the scenes.
Yeah, they've made it public. Don't be giving us the crap engines that are designed to detonate about halfway through a Grand Prix. You got to keep this
or on the final lap if you're Lando Norris. I was just looking at the standings. Poor Lando Norris. He's scored less than half the points that his teammate Carlos Sainz is. He's down in 14th position with only 25 points behind Sergio Perez, behind Kimi Räikkönen, behind Danny Kvyat and Alex Albon, but he has performed well enough to be up where Carlos Sainz is. He is in the 7th spot in the driver's standings.
I think he's been one of the most impressive rookies we've seen come around in a long time. A true rookie, very youngest Formula One guy out there. He's done a tremendous job, just hadn't had the results that you mentioned at the end of the race, just kind of had things fall apart.
Yeah, there's not much between him and Carlos Sainz. And Carlos Sainz, remember, gave Max Verstappen a run for his money when they were teammates at Toro Rosso. He wasn't that far off of him. It's kind of like looking back and you don't know exactly what your teammate's made out of when you're both rookies. But when you look, go down the road 3 or 4 years and you see that Max Verstappen, race winner and possible championship contender in the near future, Carlos Sainz more than held his own against him, and it's obvious that even though he doesn't have the points to show for it, so is Lando Norris.
Yeah. Eric, this next news story is filed under the well, duh, and that's Günther Steiner saying that the terrible results and all of the problems that the Haas teams have had this year are literally killing him. Duh.
Yeah, he kind of wears his emotions on his sleeve and face, to put it bluntly. So I'm not surprised that he's losing sleep over this.
And there's no light at the end of the tunnel currently. The car's not very good. The drivers seem to wreck each other.
It's been short of a fairy tale from the start, but Haas has been very successful regularly in the points ever since their debut Grand Prix. They didn't go through that initial teething phase.
Yeah, this is kind of it for them. This is the first time they've really been challenged.
Yeah, this is the biggest roadblock we've seen since Haas entered the sport, and this is kind of Gunter's baby, so of course he's going to take the lumps here. Yeah. You can blame the drivers for costing them some points here and there, but it's obvious they don't have a good weapon to fight with right now, and that's leading to more mistakes, leading to poor decisions and things like that. But the biggest problem, I think, is that they just don't know why. Yeah. If you stink and you know why, and you're like, well, we went the wrong way and we don't have the right downforce here and there's nothing much that can be done about it, but we know what to do in the future, i.e. Ferrari, then that gives you some solace and something to work for. But if you don't understand your problems, you're just swinging and just flailing in the dark, hoping you hit on something, and it's not an enviable place to be.
No, because unlike Williams, who has a slow car no matter what, Haas has a fast car in practice. They have a fast car in qualifying. They get in the race, and it's just awful. They just cannot keep that car balanced.
Yeah, they can't turn the tires on is the problem, is they're not using their tires. It's a fine line of overusing your tires and not turning them on, and it seems like most teams are consistently close to that window, some better than others, but Haas is just, for some reason, that car does not want to react to the current Pirelli rubber, which is meant to be fragile. It's meant to have a narrow operating window. It's meant to be less predictable, but if you throw enough money at anything in simulators, you can start to predict it, and it becomes more processional to the layman like you or I. But who knows what they're going to do with the tire next year? They were talking about changing that. So
yeah, speaking of that, Renault went out and tested that 18-inch wheel, and it looked weird. I mean, that's a big wheel.
Isn't NASCAR doing 18 inches as well?
Yeah, they're going to do them as well. It looks funny on a Formula One car. It looks like a jacked up hoopty.
They're going to look like Hot Wheels.
The rims, it does. It's exactly what it looks like. But I know the Renault team completed the testing of that. So we'll see. I think that's still a 2021 deal, but maybe it's 2020. I'm not 100% sure.
It's 2021 as part of the new ground effects rules revolution.
The final stories I have are really kind of some rumors going around, and neither one do I think come to fruition, but they're fun to kind of talk about. Been a lot of talk since the Sebastian Vettel issue and with the halo that maybe Formula One cars need spotters around the track to help them in some of those situations. There's been people that said, hey, if we have spotters, you don't have what just happened there. What are your thoughts on that? I can tell you this. If it's a driver that speaks English, I'm going to be the first person to throw up my hand and say, hey, I spotted for Bill Elliott and Kevin Harvick. I can spot for you, Ferrari. I'm right on that. I just don't see it happening.
You work cheap, too, right?
Totally.
You work for credentials and pasta.
Well, yeah, I'll be out there, man. I'll move.
I think it's, even at NASCAR road courses, it's kind of weird how they have to stack spotters all around just the trouble areas. And the issue that Vettel had was a rejoin, and that could happen anywhere. I don't think you're ever going to be 100% covered.
Right.
And I think it's really going to mess up the radio chatter. I think it seems a little weird, a little far-fetched.
Could you imagine a Formula One race with, like, outside, clear? That would be hilarious.
That would be kind of funny. But I think if you're wanting to solve this problem...
I don't know what accent that was either.
It was
like Karun Shandon or something. It was
somewhere between Italy and India.
Yes.
So if this is really a safety issue with the halo and the mirrors and all that stuff, right now these mirrors are more aerodynamic devices than anything else. If you want to make the cars safer and solve this problem, the answer is not spotters. The answer is the FIA should mandate mirrors that work. Put out the parameters, say they have to do this. Heck, even put a reverse camera on the steering wheel. I don't care. If you can have it in your road car, we can put it in a Formula One car. Or you just wait until you're sure that you're clear. That's another way to do it. But I think the spotter thing is going to... Can you imagine going to Spa-Francorchamps? How many spotters would you need to get around that track?
It'd be like an MRN Road America trip, maybe more.
Yeah. It would be... You would have to construct separate pylon, stands for spotters. Some teams are going to jump all over it. Some teams wouldn't. I think it would be awkward more than anything.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to happen either, but it's fun to talk about. The other thing that they've been talking about is shaking up qualifying. Personally, I think Formula One does qualifying as good as anybody.
Every time they try to mess with it, they screw it up.
There's people wanting them to do qualifying races to give the fans a little something more to watch. I just don't see that. Why would you screw up a good thing?
Here's how I want to do it. Keep it exactly how it is, and then the top 10 start where they are. If you don't make the top 10 shootout, we do a quick qualifying race after GP2 or Formula 2 or GP3 at the end of the Saturday program, and that determines the rest of your lineup. That way we could see a Renault fighting a McLaren, fighting a Toro Rosso for something that matters on the racetrack, out in front of the pack where they're the focus of it. Just a short 10-lap sprint race or something like that, but don't mess with the pole shootout right now. I
think it's perfect.
Sometimes it's better than the race.
Yep.
To me, the two best parts of Formula One over the course of any weekend is the last 10 minutes of qualifying, because you get your blood pressure up and you see who's going to lay down that first quick lap in the opening volley, and then there's that tension, and it's only 2 or 3 minutes, but everyone goes in and it builds tension. And then you go out and see if they can do better and if something strange is going to happen or who's going to rise to the occasion. That 10 minutes is probably the best extended period of the weekend for me. And then the standing start, the lights, the tension, the revs, and who gets the launch. And I used to complain that, man, with the camera angles you see, you can't really tell who got the best launch on a standing start. It's only with the helicopter replays that it becomes obvious who out-timed who and who had the clutch point the best and who got the grip. But I've kind of learned to embrace the uncertainty of those low-angle cameras with the cars coming right at you. Who's got it? Who's got it? I think when we were watching it live, we would have been crap commentators because we were just, is it Bottas? Is it? Contact!
You're right.
So those are the two things that are absolutely perfect in F1 right now. You can talk about passing and destroying your tires and the refueling and ground effects race cars and all that stuff can be debated, but the two things you don't touch is what determines pole position right now and the standing start procedures. Those two things are absolutely perfect. Don't you dare change them. If you want to do a heat race, take the guys who didn't make the top 10 and let them fight it out for the glory of starting 11th.
Love it. Love it. I think they have a perfect procedure. I agree with you 100%. By the way, going to see all of what you just discussed in person, have booked the trip. I'm going to Austin.
This is your first F1 race, right?
My first F1 race in person, yep.
Pop that cherry in COTA. And you've been to COTA before, right, for Lone Star Le Mans and Grand Am and all that stuff. I've only been there for the supercars. I went to the V8 supercar race in 2013 because I always tend to be working on NASCAR weekend. But I think you will have an absolute blast.
Can't wait.
It is so cool to see those cars just rocketing by on the limit. And you're not going to want to miss a second of on-track. Make sure, FP1, FP2, FP3.
Oh, we're doing the whole thing.
Yeah. If you get Gen Ad, or I'm not sure what their policies are, if you buy tickets in one particular grandstand or whatever, the best part is to just walk around.
Yeah.
I like to pick a spot and then walk counter course and then just see them from all the different vantage points. And then, by the end of day one, you go, oh, I really liked it here, or I really liked it here. There's a screen over here. There's a good PA speaker over here, that sort of thing, and build up your weekend to what's best for qualifying, what's best for the race. But I'm super excited for you. You're going to have a blast.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
You're bringing the kids, right?
Yeah, I'm bringing Ryan. He's totally stoked to go. And as part of your ticket, they have two great concerts. Friday night, Imagine Dragons. Saturday night, Pink. I mean, they're not at the top of my list, but those are quality acts.
Those are A-list.
Those are $100 tickets if they were coming to your town, and it's part of your Formula One ticket. So excited. I'm sure they'll have the Porsche Cup out there, and I don't know if Formula 2 runs with them in the States or not. Maybe Formula 3, maybe the U.S. Formula 3. I don't know.
Maybe.
I'm sure it'll be lots of track action, so we're excited about that. It's gonna be that's going to be a really good time. All right, we got to take a break, and I'll probably actually stick the break in this time since I didn't last week, but we'll take a break. When we come back, it's the Morse Code Report, and that's right after this on American Racing Snobs.
Here's your chance to win a set of your very own Hercules tires. Go to HerculesTires.com/MRN. Simply register, and each month we'll give away one set of tires. Hercules Tires has the value, selection, and industry-leading mileage coverage to get you wherever you need to go, no matter where the road takes you. Register now for your chance to win a set of Hercules tires at HerculesTires.com/MRN. Hercules Tires. Ride on our street.
Welcome back to American Racing Snobs. Eric Morse alongside Tony Rizzuti, and there was a lot of action worldwide that we're going to recap for you real quick in the Morse Code Report. A little bit of news coming out of Formula E. Mercedes announced a couple former McLaren properties. Stoffel Van Dorn and current F2 points leader Nick De Vries will be driving for their team, Tony.
Very nice, good-looking car, too.
Yeah, they've been a lot of manufacturer support has been swinging towards Formula E, away from the World Endurance Championship, away from DTM. We haven't seen huge casualties from F1 yet, but you can tell that this series has staying power. I think this is now the 5th or 6th season that they're entering. They figured out their car battery issue, so you don't have to change cars in the middle of the race. That was new for last year. And the talent level and the unpredictability of this series is really hard to match. You go to watch one of these races, and you have no idea what's going to happen.
Let me ask you this. If you put on your thinking cap and look 5 years into the future, do you see them running some bigger courses, or do you think they stay with this street thing? And if you look out 10 to 15 years, is this what Formula One becomes?
I think that was kind of the goal. I don't know exactly how people are going to embrace the hybrid technology as their primary motorsport. We saw that at Le Mans, where they tried to go with this hybrid engine with the Audis and then the Porsches and Toyotas, and they kind of lost. I don't think that those cars were necessarily turning fans off, but the manufacturers themselves said, we don't really see the value in this. They went to Formula E. We'll see if this is got the staying power long term. I think it just provides another alternative. We've talked about this before. I would love to see them on some proper racing circuits instead of just street courses, because some of these tracks are so narrow. Yeah. It's hard to really get a feel for the flow of a race, but sometimes that's fun. But they offer up a very specific type of racing How that lasts into the future, it's really hard to predict. But so far, 5 years strong. I think a lot of people didn't think they'd make it that far.
Yeah.
The car count is good. Manufacturer support is good. The talent level of the drivers, just talking about who Mercedes has signed up there. I think the future is bright for Formula E. I'm not sure what their ratings are like worldwide. I know in the States they're probably well off of what we see for Formula One. But if you're a racing nerd like we are, you're probably going to watch it.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool in 5 years. I think their current model really works, right? If you can do it around a city, you can really gather a bigger crowd.
It's an event.
Because it's an event. You wander around. There's lots of things going on. So I think that's a good model for them. Most of these circuits over in Europe, in fact, all of them really have alternate layouts to their racetrack to where you can shorten them up, change them up. So they could do some things to where maybe you don't do the full course that a Formula One team would do, a shortened course with some additional chicanes that might be better for that battery. I'd love to see that at some of those events. And, it is hard to predict 10, 15 years out because right now, not that many people, and by people I mean just regular fans, have battery-operated cars. Some people have a Tesla. There's Chevy Volt. There's the Prius. There is some hybrid technology, but it's on the very low end of what people have. 15, 20 years from now, that may be the majority of what we have. Volvo's already said we're only going to make electric cars after 2021. There's been some other companies that said the same thing. Look, we're going to go full electric. Once you have an electric car, maybe the idea of hearing and seeing an electric race car becomes a little bit more normal than it was. Who knows, but I think what Formula E has right now is working, and it'll be interesting, to say the least, to see how it all develops over time.
Yeah, their season starts with a doubleheader in Saudi Arabia, November 22nd and 23rd. One other silly season move. Looks like Andre Lauderer is getting a new home. He's moving from Techeetah, who won the championship with Jean-Eric Vergne. He's moving from his teammate over to Porsche. He's going to be replaced by Antonio Felix da Costa. Basically, half the drivers, it seems like, in Formula E are ex-Red Bull property.
Yeah. Well, they have such a great junior program.
Yeah, they sure do. And when they wash out, it seems like Formula E and the World Endurance Championship, those drivers are almost completely overlapped. The Venn diagram, they can never schedule a race on the same weekend between WEC and Formula E. They tried to a couple of years ago, and everybody just flipped out going, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Something else to keep note of in the W Series, Catherine Legg has thrown her hat into the ring for Season 2 of the W Series, and she'll start to go through the selection process to make that grid. That would be wonderful.
I like Catherine Legg.
Who doesn't? If you've met her, she's fantastic, and she's a demon behind the wheel. We've seen her win races in IMSA. She's run competitively in Champ Car, IndyCar, that sort of thing. I think she'd be great for that series. However, the question is this supposed to be a series that finds young, undiscovered talent and launches them, or can it be a proving ground for someone who's been in there? It's hard to say exactly what their mission statement is to a driver like Catherine Legg, who does have some worldwide recognition, but as a female coming up, probably hasn't had the same opportunities that her male counterparts have.
Do you feel this series is kind of the idea behind it and kind of the public opinion of it has changed now that they have a season? Because if you'll remember right, there were two different groups when it came to the W Series. There were those that said, this is awesome, and then there were other people that are going, you have just degraded women because you're basically saying we need our own series. We can't run with the men, and lots that were running with the men were like, this is ridiculous. Just race with the men. Prove that you can. Don't have your own series. But I kind of feel like some of that public opinion has turned now and gone, you know what, this is a good development series, and there is kind of some jumping points from this series to others.
Well, it's not supposed to be their own series as an end game. This is a launching point. This is how you get noticed.
But remember, there was a lot of venom around it, even from female drivers that thought this was a horrible idea.
I was kind of split when I heard about it, but after watching a race, I was like, this is really fun, and now I know so much more about these racers that I probably wouldn't know much about. And now Jamie Chadwick is on everyone's radar.
Yeah.
She's got that Williams contract, and Alice Powell was at the race in VIR, and I was excited to see her race in IMSA after getting that opportunity because she was a race winner, I believe, at Brands Hatch in the season finale. So it's doing what it's supposed to. It's raising awareness. The question is, does a driver like Catherine Legg does that lift the series up as opposed to the series lifting the driver up?
Right. Be interesting.
Now, we'll keep an eye on that. Busy weekend for IMSA. A little bit of news and notes first. Alex Rossi out at Team Penske. Graham Rahal will be returning to that car. Remember, he was the endurance driver last year. They replaced him with Alex Rossi. You know why they have gone back to Graham Rahal?
I do not know why.
Alex Rossi will be in Bathurst that weekend.
Ah, yes, that's right. He and Hinchcliffe headed over to
They've
Australia.
got the wild card Walkinshaw Andretti United entry in the Bathurst 1000, one of my favorite races of the year. So they have reconsigned Graham Rahal to drive
the mountain. Mount Panorama?
Yep. What else is going on in IMSA? Felipe Nasr and Pippo Durrani have been confirmed to stay in the Whelen Cadillac. Remember, Felipe Nasr had tested with Aero Schmidt-Peterson.
That kid's got talent.
And he was very quick in that. However, I think in all the drama around the McLaren merger and takeover there's a lot of uncertainty. He's got a really fast car in IMSA. I think that's really the fastest driver lineup you could ask for is two young, quick drivers who could be a force of nature in any series they choose to drive in. I'd be curious to see what Pippo Durrani could do in an IndyCar myself. But Felipe Nasr, ex-F1 driver for Sauber. So they've got that lineup coming back.
Never really got a fair shake there, but, I mean, you could say that about 20 or 30 people that have been in Formula One. But
in recent years,
would have liked to have seen him get another shot. I think he had the real talent.
Yeah, it's just a question of opportunity and funding, and where is that car on the grid when you happen to get that opportunity, and how long does your funding last? Speaking of IMSA, they were in action at Laguna Seca this past weekend. Their penultimate race, all four categories in action. In the DPI category, it was a Team Penske breakaway early. The 7 car had a little bit of an off and then got caught up in traffic, and that allowed Juan Pablo Montoya and Dane Cameron to sneak by their teammate for a Penske 1-2 finish ahead of the Whelen Cadillac. Now, that's really important because it's Montoya and Cameron who were leading the points coming in, so they were able to get both cars in front of their nearest rival. So now the tandem of Felipe Nasr and Pippo Durrani are back 12 points, with the other Penske Acura now 20 back of the leader as we head to Petit Le Mans. That is the series finale. In LMP2, I didn't pay attention because who cares? There's only 2 cars. In GT Le Mans, however, Ford GT got their penultimate race finished with a victory with Dirk Muller and Joey Hand. So that was really exciting to see. Very cool. Beautiful race car. It's only going to be a factory effort one more time again at Petit Le Mans, and then that program is done. It has brought me
what a great program,
so much joy over the years.
Such a great program.
Starting in 2016 on the 50th anniversary of the original Ford GT's victory at Le Mans.
Chip Ganassi did a great job with that program.
Yeah, the car looked great. They had fantastic drivers. The BOP was wonky at times. Sometimes they were quicker than they should have been. They were buried sometimes when I don't think they should have been, but it was great to see that car on top, possibly for the last time, unless they can go out with a bang at Petit Le Mans, so we'll keep an eye on that. Oh, and in the point standings there, Porsche is still killing it in the points with the tandem of Bamber and Vantor. That combo is leading their teammates of Nick Tandy and Patrick Pilet by 12 points going into the final race. And in GTD, it was Lamborghini, car number 48, with Corey Lewis and Brian Sellers getting the victory. In the standings there, it's the Acura of Mario Fambacher and Trent Hinman. They have a huge lead. They almost clinched the championship at Laguna Seca. It's all but a formality when they go to Petit Le Mans. They got a big lead in points over Zach Robichon's Plaid Porsche. Almost able to wrap that up a week early, but as I mentioned, it all comes down to that all-day Saturday event, the 10 hours, Petit Le Mans on October 12th. Make sure you check that one out on NBC.
Really like Brian Sellers. Super nice kid. Really good race car driver. Back when he was driving the Falcon Porsche, we were covering IMSA. He was just a great guy to talk to. Very informative, very laid back. Always like to see good things happen to good people.
Right on. Elsewhere in the world of motorsports, the Australian supercars were not in Australia. They were in New Zealand at Pukekohe.
Where? Pukekohe?
Yeah, Pukekohe. One of my favorite tracks to say. And the Kiwi drivers didn't disappoint. In fact, the Kiwis swept the weekend in New Zealand. Nice. Race number 1 controlled by Shane Van Gisbergen from the pole position. That's his 3rd win of the season, with Cam Waters in 2nd. And David Reynolds was 3rd. I've got more on him in just a bit. We'll come back to Dave Reynolds. In race number 2, this was a dramatic one. The 888 of Jamie Whincup got his first pole of the season, but there was confusion. There was a full-course safety car. He was not the leader at the time because of the way the pits were cycling up, but it looked like the pace car tried to pick up him. He was confused, went by the pace car, and then picked up a drive-through penalty, kicked him down to the 16th position, and that kicked the lead over to who other than Scotty McLaughlin, and he was able to hold on for his record-breaking 17th victory of the season. You know how they say that down there? 17.
Nice.
Win number 17.
Still amazing to me in these modern times that we can screw up timing and scoring in a race.
It's one of those things where it's still analog when you have to send the safety car out, and there was some confusion as to who was the race leader because it happened during pit stops.
Yeah.
So things like that happen. He was not waved by. They looked at it in video replay and assessed him with a drive-through penalty that ruined his race. I want to give a big shout-out to Simona Di Silvestro.
Yeah.
Best career finish. She might have had better races in her Aussie supercar career. I think the first year at Newcastle, she was running 5th or 6th and then got punted late in the race. Didn't get the finish she deserved. But she did come home in 7th place. That's her second top 10 and her best finish so far in the series. So congrats to the Swiss Miss.
Super cool.
I mentioned Erebus driver David Reynolds.
Yes.
Big speculation around him with silly season in the Australian supercars because he was out of contract at the end of this year. Well, we can speculate no more. The team has just locked him up to a 10-year contract. Have you ever heard of anything like that?
No.
This deal goes through 2029. He is currently 34 years old.
What the?
Right now, the oldest full-time driver in this series is James Courtney, who is 39. He'll be 5 years older than the oldest driver is right now when his contract
I'd love to see that contract.
Ends.
There's got to be an out in that contract.
He's a 7-time winner in the series, including Bathurst in 2017. So you look at Erebus, they're a midfield team. Betty Klemenko is one of the most eccentric and wonderful personalities in all of motorsports. She's the owner there at Erebus. And this brings them some stability. They've already locked up Antoine Di Pasquale, so they've got a really solid driver lineup. But the 10-year thing, this takes me back to, 2006 when the NHL had their new collective bargaining agreement, and these teams and agents found a loophole where you could do something crazy where if you signed somebody to 10 or 15 years, you could front-end load the contract, make sure your player got paid pretty much up front, and then if you're just paying him like league minimum at the end of the contract, the salary cap would only look at the average annual hit.
Does that series have a cap?
No, which is why this doesn't make any sense.
You just wanted to work hockey.
I was thinking about this. In 2006, there was a contract that it's the only thing I can compare this to was Rick DiPietro, the goalie for the New York Islanders, signed a 15-year contract. And like I said, that was all about the collective bargaining agreement and a salary cap, things that do not apply in the Australian supercars or any racing series that I can think of. But it did get me thinking, because I remember chatting with my hockey buddy in Daytona, Andrew Booth, who works for Daytona International Speedway, is also a big hockey fan. And I remember saying in the middle of the summer of 2006, when that deal was signed, there is one athlete on planet Earth that I think I would give a 10-year contract to.
Who was that at that time?
Jimmy Johnson. He was without a championship. He was still in the middle of his first championship season that year, but I had seen enough of him to know that I liked what I saw, both as a human being and as a race car driver. So that got me thinking. This is why I wanted to work hockey into this. Who would you sign to a 10-year contract? Let's go across some of these racing series. Who would be your guy that you want to lock up?
Right now?
Yeah.
I'd lock up Charles Leclerc. I'd lock up Max Verstappen.
Who would you rather have to a 10-year deal? On Tony Rizzuti Racing, powered by Ferrari.
Max.
You'd take Max.
I might change my mind late next year, but Max.
I think Max is quicker. He can still be a little petulant.
Got a huge fan base.
Yeah,
not that Charles may not now after winning at Monza, but
I think that I like Leclerc's temperament, but yeah, I think those are the two guys I'd be looking at.
Max has Kyle Busch talent and a Kyle Busch mentality.
I have argued that
God,
before.
we've worked in hockey and NASCAR. People stopped listening at minute mark 40. We lost the snobs.
My dad did not appreciate my Max Verstappen, Kyle Busch analogy when I told him that.
They're the same dude. They're kind of goofy looking, and they're uber aggressive, and they can wheel a race car.
There is no denying their talent. There's a little bit of friction between, obviously, Max Verstappen and Danny Ricciardo. It didn't get to the breaking point, but it's still, where they were blowing up at each other.
It was very apparent in the Drive to Survive series when it was Ricciardo's birthday and everything. Max wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah, to me,
Max is about Max, and that's what I want out of my Formula One guy.
Qualifying last year when Danny pipped him to the pole, he looked like just the kid at the birthday party who didn't get to hit the piñata because the guy in front of him broke it. That sort of thing. So just for that tiny little reason, I might swing towards Leclerc. But which IndyCar driver would you throw a 10-year contract at?
I don't. Rossi. Who's the Colton Herta? Maybe
Herta was the first one that came in my mind. I think maybe Newgarden would be in that discussion as well. But Newgarden's been in that series, 7 years? 6 or 7 seasons now, because he came up with Sarah Fisher before going to Ed Carpenter and then getting the Penske promotion. But I think that you could see 10 productive years out of those 3 drivers. I think those are the 3 most obvious ones. I don't know. Just a 10-year contract to a 34-year-old driver really jumped off the page at me.
If you were that's not even worth it. I was going to say, if you were a midfield team that's right on the cusp and you could sign Lewis, but to sign Lewis you had to sign him to 10, would you do it? I think I would.
Yeah, but why would Lewis do it?
I know, but I'm just saying, if that was his requirement, you got to sign me for 10.
He wouldn't be the first driver to do that.
Lewis is how old?
I think he's 34.
So you'd be taking him into his mid-40s.
You think about Damon Hill.
But according to him, the cars have gotten way easier to drive.
Yeah. You think about Damon Hill. He didn't sign a super long-term contract, but when he lost his Williams ride, he ended up driving for, who was that, Arrows?
Yeah, might have been.
He very nearly won a race driving for Arrows, and then I think he ended up at Jordan at the end of his career and did get a victory there. So he wouldn't be the first, world champion driver to go from an elite seat and then have to take something like that. Not that we're saying that's eminent. And yes, I just checked. Lewis is 34.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's still got. Michael was 36 when he got pushed out, give or take, and he wasn't ready to go either. And I think Lewis is going to get to leave on his terms, no matter what, whether that's from Mercedes or elsewhere. But that still shocks me that they pushed Michael Schumacher out the way they did in 2006 at Ferrari. You talk about a driver who you thought would have a lifetime contract as long as he wanted to race, but they wanted Kimi Räikkönen.
The Iceman.
Well, I mean, I think Kimi's best years were in that McLaren. He was electrifying.
Yeah, he was.
And he was good in that Ferrari, good enough to just barely beat the dueling teammates of Hamilton and Alonso in 2007. But after that, he's been good but not great. He used to be just electric in that McLaren in the mid to early 2000s. That would have been a driver that you could have gotten away with a 10-year contract early on there.
Early on, yep.
Yeah. But, yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, good stuff. Anything else?
That's all I got.
All right.
Empty the bucket.
There you go. Hey, we did.
Oh, actually, no, one other thing. IndyCar finale. IndyCar finale is coming up. Super exciting because we've got 3 guys.
Double points?
Yep. 3 guys really with a shot. You can include Scott Dixon on the outside, but he's going to need a minor miracle. But right now, Joseph Newgarden does control his own destiny. 41-point advantage, even with the double points. 4th or better gets him the championship, no matter what Alex Rossi or Simon Pagenaud can do. Only 1 point separating those two in the fight for second. They're hoping something goes wrong. If they can beat the other driver that they're fighting, there is still a chance for Rossi to get his first championship or Pagenaud to get his second. But right now, Newgarden holds all the cards, looking for championship number 2 at Team Penske in 3 years for the young Tennessee native. So we'll keep an eye on that. Laguna Seca, what an awesome track.
Mm-hmm.
Get to watch races from Laguna Seca on consecutive weekends. How lucky are we?
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Hey, great report. You were locked and loaded today. That thing was sweet. Let's review Singapore Grand Prix this weekend. They added a third DRS between turns 13 and 14. I'm going with Lewis Hamilton for the win. Charles Leclerc would be my kind of surprise guy to keep an eye on, maybe slip in there for the win. And I have Carlos Sainz as my midfield MVP. Eric, for the win you have?
I am going to say if Verstappen can beat Hamilton on Saturday, it's going to be a Max Verstappen weekend. We'll see if that Honda Spec 4 is all it's cracked up to be and what kind of party mode it has in qualifying. I think that's going to define the weekend.
I agree. Who are you keeping your eye on?
I'm keeping my eye on Alex Albon in the other Red Bull.
And since we're all hopped up on energy drinks, tell us who your midfield MVP is.
Danny Kvyat in the Toro Rosso, ex-Red Bull driver Danny Kvyat.
But for the record, you like Carlos Sainz first, and you're just going opposite, so that's all good. Hey, as always, thanks for listening. Eric and I are kind of working on doing another live viewing. We're still working out some details. We had so much fun with you guys joining us before watching the race live. Eric's got people that want to fly in and see it as it's done. So we're trying to work that out. Don't hold us to it, but we're trying to make that happen. We'd love to have you again. Stay tuned for details here on the American Racing Snobs. And for Eric Morse, I am Tony Rizzuti. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on another edition of American Racing Snobs. Enjoy Singapore.